Okay, Alexander here, back at you with another informational video for the week. We are talking how to use your DSLR mirrorless camera, a camera you traditionally bought for photos, and turning it and using it for video work. Now, if you're interested, or anybody like me, it was very much of a challenge for me to flip the switch on my camera from photo to video mode and tell my clients and my creative friends with confidence that yes, I can film that music video, I can film that wedding video, or whatever the case may be. So if you're interested in hearing some of the fundamentals, stay tuned.
Stable, oh yeah, no label, oh yeah, you know me, I have only a path, I'm lonely, but damn, I'm going.
Hey everyone, Alexander, Jawfoxphotography.com. I hope everyone's doing all right. This week we are talking how to use your DSLR mirrorless camera for video work. This topic has been presented by my friend on Instagram. Her name is Patty. She's a very talented portrait and landscape photographer, and she reached out to me asking how she could better use her DSLR that she originally purchased for photos for video work. So let's just jump right into it. First and foremost, understand that this is a very quick video, all designed to get you thinking. This is by no means going to teach you all the fundamentals. You have to get out there and just practice, keep practicing, keep doing it. That's the best way to learn, at least in my experience. We live in a day and age where information is readily presented to us. You have free knowledge out there. It just takes the time to research and figure out the best way for you and how you learn. So just keep practicing, keep learning, keep networking with people. I've worked with a lot of different creatives. I've worked for a few different film studios. Ultimately, I learned by practicing and not giving up. Okay, I'm breaking this video down. For simplicity's sake, we're just going to hit each bullet and talk about it very briefly. These are bullets that I think are important. I think you should research if you are looking to up your game in the video world. Okay, why film at all? Like, if you're a photographer, why should I offer video services for my clients? Well, if you have any bit of an interest in it, I highly encourage it because it's really fun. It's a lot of hard work, of course, but it's a lot of fun to be able to tell somebody's story, to be able to showcase something in a new light. They say if a picture's worth 1,000 words, then imagine what a 30-second video could do for a small business, especially if done correctly. The video work is a hot commodity. People are going to reach out to you for those services if you can provide them. So learn those services, learn how to best provide them, and it'll work out for you as a creative. 4K or 1080, don't get bent around the hype that you need a 4K camera. After you upload to Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, there's codecs and compressions that happen to your video that don't really render as true 4K, so it really doesn't make a whole lot of a difference if you upload in 4K or 1080. So sticking with 1080 is going to be just fine. I have very few clients that request 4K footage. As long as it looks clean, crisp, it's in focus, and I've paid attention to my fundamentals, that's all they care about. So 4K is really just a luxury at this point. I'm sure 4K in a couple of years will be the industry standard, but for right now, 1080 is just fine. So when we're doing film work, we want to, of course, account for our exposure just like we would in photography. I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence, but the exposure triangle is in fact your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture. If you're not familiar with those, chances are you've been filming and doing photo work in automatic mode, and I can't stress enough to not do that. If you're shooting in automatic mode on your camera, whether it's photo or film, you're not utilizing your camera to its full potential. You might as well just be using your cell phone for those shots because your footage is going to look very bland. It's not going to be creative. It's not going to be dynamic. So really tapping into those manual exposure settings is going to allow you to unleash the full power of your DSLR mirrorless camera, which is what you spent all that money for in the first place. So utilize those manual settings. If you're not sure how to use those manual settings, again, it all just boils down to practicing, playing around with different shutter speeds, different apertures, and different ISOs. Look them up, get familiar with them, practice with them, play with them. It's going to be very beneficial for you. Okay, another thing I think you should keep in mind and research is your frame rate. Frame rates is the number of frames taken per second on your camera. Now, frame rates aren't all equal. If you're filming at 120 frames a second versus 24 frames a second, it's a very big difference. Typically, the industry standard for cinematic footage is 23.98. That's what I film most of my corporate videos, most of my wedding videos, most of any footage I don't want to have to slow down and edit is going to be filmed at 23.98. Now, if I want dramatic videos or something to be slowed down in post, then I'll film at 60 frames a second or even 120 frames per second if your camera can allow for that. Keep in mind what frame rate you're going to want to film in before you start filming. Typically, if it's behind the scenes footage or if it's B-roll or slow motion footage, I'm always going to film at 120 frames or 60 frames a second. Anything else, I'll film at 23.98. White balance. White balance is incredibly important because unlike photos, when you can just plug them into Photoshop or Lightroom and manually adjust all the white balance in post-production, it's a little more difficult in video world. So always consider your white balance. Don't just leave it on auto white balance and think it's going to work out for you. Typically, I'm always manually adjusting my white balance on the Kelvin scale based on where I'm at. If I'm outdoors or indoors with tungsten lighting or fluorescent lighting or stage lighting or studio lighting, it makes a big difference. So always consider your white balance before production. The shutter speed rule, just like in photography, that dictates your shutter speed should be twice your focal length. So if I'm photographing on a 50mm lens, my shutter speed, if I'm shooting handheld, should at least be 1/100. Same thing applies in the cinematography world. To achieve the highest quality cinematic footage, if you're going that route, then you should be using the shutter speed rule, which states that your shutter speed should be twice your frame rate. Now again, this is just a crash course. If you are interested in why that's the case, feel free to do some research, but if you want your footage looking cinematic as possible, consider the shutter speed rule. Now sometimes you're filming outdoors, it's really bright outside, and you usually adjust your shutter speed to account for how bright it is outside. But if you're trying to apply the shutter speed rule, then you can't. So you need to maintain those exposure settings by using an ND filter. An ND filter is essentially sunglasses for your camera, and it's going to allow you to maintain those exposure settings, those manual exposure settings, while controlling the amount of light that comes in through your lens. It'll be a great tool for you as a filmmaker. Your gear. Now everybody gets bent around the type of camera they have, and like I mentioned, is it a 4K camera? How many megapixels? This and that if you're doing photos. Don't worry so much about your gear, just practice with what you have. A lot of the times, if you spent $500 or $5,000 on a camera, they both are going to take very high quality footage if it's a DSLR mirrorless camera. Higher quality footage than a cell phone would if you know how to apply those manual exposure settings, if you know how to apply manual settings that allow you to achieve that look that you're going for. Right now, I'm using an $1,800 camera called the USR. It's been my go-to camera for a lot of work. I've filmed music videos, wedding videos, corporate videos. I've filmed interviews. I've done documentaries with this camera. It has great low light capabilities. So you don't need to spend a whole lot of money. You don't think you have to go buy a $20,000 red camera to achieve high quality footage. It really just boils down to your settings, your technique and your style, your lighting, and your post-production. If I had to give any advice on what kind of gear to get, I would say your lens are almost as important, if not more important, than the camera body you're using, because the lens are going to determine your angle, they're going to determine your depth of field, the look of your footage. I'd always recommend two lenses, a zoom lens and a prime lens. If you don't know what a zoom lens is, it's basically one with multiple focal lengths, and a prime lens is one that's fixed at a certain focal length, such as a 50mm. The best film lens I would recommend, for me anyway, is I would say either a 35 1.4 or a 50 if I'm going with a prime route, and a 16-35 or a 24-70 if I'm going the zoom route. Keep in mind, you're gonna want, if you want that low depth of field like you see in the background right now. Okay, so here's an example with wall more in focus. It doesn't look as cinematic. Typically you wanna have a lower depth of field if you are going for a more cinematic look. All right, and now we're back to normal. So gear isn't everything, but definitely pay attention to the gear as you can afford it, as you can upgrade. All right, some additional components to keep in mind is your editing software. Your editing software is going to make a big difference. Post-production is definitely one of the most important aspects to a production. Editing can make or break a production, so definitely learn editing, learn that software. If you're doing professional work, I would definitely recommend professional editing platforms such as Adobe Premiere, DaVinci Resolve, or Final Cut Pro X. Along with post-production is color correcting and color grading. This is a process that takes some time to learn. I'm learning it myself. I do use basic fundamentals in color correcting. I also use Cinema Grade, which is a plugin for Final Cut Pro, to color grade. Keep in mind, these are all rules that cinematographers and creatives should follow, but rules are meant to be broken, especially in the artist world. Know the rules to break the rules. There are times where the shutter speed rule might not apply. There are times where you might use the wrong frame rate on purpose. There are times when you might, use the wrong angle on purpose. So just keep in mind that rules are meant to be broken, but if you understand the fundamentals and the rules, it'll only serve you better in the long run. Once you have the fundamentals down, just explore as a creative, explore as an artist, get down and do different angles, do different things, do things you haven't seen other people do before. That's what defines you as an artist, as a creative. B-roll is essentially supplemental footage that enhances the story. So don't get so tied up around B-roll as much as if there is a story to be told. Just tell the story and then worry about B-roll later. Drones are a great way and a great tool to get additional angles, get additional perspectives. I would highly recommend investing in a drone if you are trying to pursue video work. Also, stabilization. Stabilization is very, very important. It's going to be one of the key giveaways between an amateur and a professional. Professionals go through great lengths to get very stable footage for the scene that calls for it. You can achieve stability with a tripod and a gimbal. I'm just talking, there's all sorts of other expensive options out there, but I'm just talking about the two that are practical for you right now. Invest in a high quality tripod. As is pointed out to me when I first started out in photography, why would you get a tripod that's $50 when your camera's $500? You're really gonna trust your camera sitting on top of something that flimsy. So definitely get you a good tripod. And I'm using a fluid head. A fluid head allows you to get great tilt and pan motion, which is very important for film work as well. And last but not least is your audio and your lighting. These are things that are commonly overlooked by people that are just getting started, but lighting is a key fundamental. If you missed my last video on lighting, check it out on Instagram TV and on YouTube. I give some fundamentals on my workflow in terms of lighting. Now, audio is something that I'm still working on. I'm still working on soundproofing in my studio, putting up foam paneling and getting a better audio setup. But right now I'm using a $59 Rode mic. And it's been more than enough for me and my workflow so far. I also have some lav mics that I use for interviews and documentaries, but nonetheless, I am upgrading to a more professional audio system, and that'll be coming soon. Okay, so I hope this video has helped. It's been very quick run through. In mind, there are tons of aspects to consider when filming, things I'm learning every day, things I'm trying to learn. So get out there and do it. Practice. Practice makes perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect, I should say. So make an effort to learn something every day and just apply it. If you don't have anything to film, go out and find something to film. Film your friends, film your family. If you're feeling confident, send an email out to a small business, say, hey, I'll do some free work. Or if you do book a wedding as a photographer, offer to do some video work for them and say, you know, this is just a bonus part of the package. I'm not gonna charge you anything, but it's gonna help give you a portfolio, give you experience filming, and ultimately get you out there doing film work and getting paid to do film work. So I hope this has been helpful. It's been a little bit of information to inspire you and keep going. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.
I'm grateful, oh yeah, able, oh yeah, I'm stable, oh yeah, no label, oh yeah, you know me, I have only a path, I'm lonely, but damn, I'm going to win, yeah.